We hear about superheroes all the time, right?
Right.
But what about the everyday heroes? You know, the ones who are quietly keeping our families and communities running. They don't wear capes or anything,
Yeah.
but they're out there every day doing really essential work. Work that often goes, well, unseen.
Invisible. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what makes today's deep dive so interesting. We're going to Brazil to explore this idea of invisible labor
Okay.
through a kind of unexpected lens. Their national high school exit exam.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's called the EM.
Okay.
And I know what you might be thinking. How can an exam reveal anything about everyday heroes?
Right. Yeah.
So for Brazilian students, the EM is a really big deal. It's their ticket to higher education. You know, kind of like our SATs here,
Yeah. Yeah.
but with way higher stakes.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the pressure on these kids,
I
right?
can only imagine.
And then, you know, by extension, the pressure on their families,
Mm.
especially the women who are often the primary caregivers. And this year's EM essay question kind of threw everyone a curveball.
Really?
It did, yeah. It directly addressed this, like, often overlooked part of society by asking students to tackle the challenges of recognizing the invisible care work being done by women in Brazil.
Wow. That's pretty interesting.
Think about it. You're a young person. It's the biggest exam of your life. And there's your mom or grandma, whoever, not only getting you there, but, you know, they're providing this invisible support system that allows you to even just focus on what you have to do.
Yeah.
And then after the exam, they're not done.
Right.
They're going back to their other caregiving duties.
Yeah.
It's a 2-4-7 role, often with little or no recognition.
And it's not even just a Brazilian issue. This is happening globally. We're seeing this trend called the feminization of aging. Yeah, and what that means is, as populations age worldwide, women are disproportionately taking on the responsibility of caring for both the young and the old.
It's like they're holding up both ends of the generational spectrum.
Exactly, yeah.
It makes you wonder, how are they doing it all?
It's a really good question. It's one that Williams Fiore, he's a global expert on longevity. He's actually tackling it head-on with his research at Stanford University.
So there's actually some serious research backing this up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Fiore's work is, it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
He calls these women everyday heroines. And he's found that their contributions, they go way beyond just keeping families going. You know, it's
Yeah.
just much bigger than that.
Okay, so what has he found?
Well, his research at Stanford shows that these women, they're actually fundamental to like a thriving economy and just overall well-being in society. Yeah, they're really the glue that's holding everything together.
Which makes sense when you think about it.
You're right.
So if their work is so essential, then why is it so undervalued?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
Recognition is important, don't get me wrong,
Right.
but it's not enough. We can't just keep praising their, like, selflessness without offering real solutions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally, yeah. So what kind of concrete steps can be taken to actually create some change here? It's got to be more than a pat on the back, right?
Exactly. We need action. We need to see policy changes that provide real financial support for caregivers. Things like affordable childcare options,
Right.
better support systems for the elderly, things like that.
It sounds like we're talking about like a complete overhaul of how we think about caregiving. Is that right?
It's about changing how we, like, as a society, view this kind of work.
Okay.
We need to acknowledge that caregiving, it's not a, it shouldn't just be a personal burden for families to deal with alone.
Right.
It's a shared societal responsibility.
Yeah.
We have to start valuing this work just as much as we value careers that, you know, the ones that generate traditional income.
Right. And a huge part of that is recognizing the unequal burden that this places on women, right?
Exactly. We need a more equitable division of labor between genders. And it's not about, you know, not about taking anything away from anyone.
Right.
It's about recognizing that the current system just isn't sustainable.
Okay.
It limits women's opportunities, their career paths, their well-being even.
Yeah, it's like we're expecting them to be superheroes,
Yeah,
juggling all of this with no support.
right.
And no wonder they're feeling the pressure.
And it's not just women who suffer, you know.
Right.
Families feel the strain too, financially, emotionally, and on a larger scale, you know, societies that undervalue caregiving, they're basically neglecting a huge part of their own workforce and their potential. It hurts everyone in the end.
It's like we're saying, yeah, sure, go ahead, take care of everyone, but don't expect any help or appreciation for it.
Right.
Which is, I mean, it's kind of a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So what happens if we just keep going down this path? You know, like ignoring the issue. It's like we're so busy, you know, with our own lives that we just don't see this wave coming.
Yeah, and that's exactly why this ENAM essay topic is so important.
Yeah.
They're using their education system to say, hey, we see you caregivers. Like this is a conversation that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's something the rest of the world should be paying attention to.
It does feel like Brazil is kind of shining a spotlight on this issue that I think we all face in one way or another.
Yeah.
I mean, they even have a whole podcast. It's called Gerocast, and it focuses on longevity and aging. So it's really interesting to see them kind of like tackling this head on.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a great example of how these conversations can be happening, on all these different levels,
Right.
from something like national exams to, having dedicated platforms for media. It all starts with just making people aware of it.
So let's say, okay, we're listening.
Yeah.
We get it. What can we do as individuals, right? I mean, we're not all policymakers. We could still make a difference though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it starts with those small acts of awareness and empathy in our everyday lives. Just noticing, the invisible labor that's happening all around you. Maybe it's a colleague who's struggling to balance work with taking care of an elderly parent,
Right.
or a single parent who's juggling multiple jobs.
Just acknowledging what they're going through, that must make a difference, right?
It makes a huge difference. And if you're able to, even offering practical support, that helps too.
Okay.
Offering to pick up groceries, just being someone they can talk to when they're feeling overwhelmed. Those little things can really have a big impact.
So it's about changing from, oh, that's too bad, to what can I do?
Exactly.
We can all be those everyday heroes, even in small ways, right?
Exactly.
That's a good point.
And then if you're in a position where you can actually, advocate for bigger change, whether that's in your workplace or your community, or even just like starting these conversations with your family and friends,
Yeah.
those things can really make a difference.
Because it's not just about women's work or even just, family matters anymore. It's about all of us recognizing how important caregiving is to a functioning society.
It's essential to everything, really. A healthy society, a prosperous society.
What happens if we don't? I mean, if we just don't do anything, what's the risk here?
Well, you're looking at burnout, economic inequality, whole generations who are growing up feeling undervalued.
It's a scary thought.
It's not great.
For anyone, not at all. Well, that's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
You mentioned Gerocast. That's for folks who want to learn more about longevity and the role that caregiving plays in all of this, right?
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource, especially, it's based in Brazil, a country that's really trying to address these issues. They're
Yeah.
having those important discussions and really exploring solutions that could, have implications for everyone.
Yeah, sometimes the best solutions come from the places facing the biggest challenges, right? Well, this has been a really, I think, eye-opening deep dive for me. We've looked at the world of caregiving through like the lens of a high school exam in Brazil, which is wild.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we talked about groundbreaking research and even just, examined our own roles in valuing these everyday heroes.
Right.
So if you're interested in learning more about any of this, and I think we all should check out Gerocast.
Yeah.
You might be surprised by how relevant it all is. That's it for today's deep dive. Keep those brains buzzing because there's always more to discover.